The theme for tonight is faith in the face of hardship. Tonight we'll hear a personal account of one woman's courageous battle with one of the most unimaginable hardships, cancer. Amanda Spiro has been the liaison for the executive director of the Israel Cancer Research Fund for the last 10 years and has been honored at 2 of their charity events in Montreal. She recently started a fund through their charity called Amanda's Live, Laugh, and Learn Fund. Her message of hope, faith, and courage is a real-life, modern-day tale of heroism. Without further introduction, please join me in welcoming Amanda Spiro.
The last time I spoke for the Boyarskys, I was moments away from my due date and promised that if my water broke and I was forced to leave, that I'd come back to continue my story. Thank God I made it through to the end, but my story continues to develop and I'm extremely honored to be with you this evening. Tonight's theme is finding faith in times of adversity. We dedicate this evening to the soul of Yocheved's father, Dr. Reuven Cyrulnik. His neshama should have aliyah, and he should be a good advocate on high for the family and for all Klal Yisrael. Unfortunately, I never got the opportunity to meet him, but heard wonderful things about him and see the strength he imbued in his own children by getting to meet Yocheved. Until she asked me to speak, about him and see the strength she imbued in her own children by getting to meet Yocheved. Until she asked me to speak, and before I found out about his passing, I would never have known that she had a sick father who suffered for so many years. She was always hardworking, focused on a mission, and always with a smile on her face. I always say that we never judge, as everyone has a story. Tonight, I'm humbled to be standing here before you to share my own story. I believe that when one has a story that one can learn from, they are obligated to share it, as it has the power to inspire and the capacity to help someone grow within their life. This is why I have the strength to stand before you all and share my story, and hope that you all leave here tonight gaining something from it. Can you guys hear me? I grew up in a traditional home in Montreal, going through all the customs, but never really knowing why I was going through them. I would fast on Yom Kippur, I'd go to the shul for the high holidays, but really there was never really any meaning attached to it. I kind of just went with the flow because that's what my family did for so many years. I really felt as though everything on paper was perfect. I had a great family, I went to a good school, I had boyfriends, I had looks, I had it all. But really I always felt like something was missing, and it was very difficult because usually in life when you're struggling with something and you could put your finger on it, you usually take the right direction to be able to overcome it. But when you don't know what's wrong, it's very hard. So I felt for many years I was struggling with something within me, and I never really know why I was struggling with it. However, I did grow up with a loving family, but I was always searching for more. I was always anxious because of this, knowing there was something wrong that I didn't know. I was always very curious on the world. I always felt there had to be more to the world than what I saw. I felt as though I lived amongst Energizer bunnies that just kept going and going, never taking that precious moment to reflect on life. My friends would always laugh at me, call me philosophical and weird, that I started thinking I was weird. I knew there had to be a higher power. When I went to CEGEP, which is what we go to in Montreal after high school, I decided to go to a different CEGEP than all my friends. I thought, maybe it's my friends, I need to get a good group of friends. So I went to a different school, which was a big challenge for me because there's like 2 main CEGEPs in Montreal, and I decided to go to the more academic one, and I'm not such an academic, so it was very overwhelming for me, but I really took that leap of faith thinking, you know what, none of my friends are going there, I'm bound to meet new friends. So I went there. The first week of school was obviously very overwhelming, taking this challenge upon myself, as well as being that transition period from high school to CEGEP. The first week, they just handed out the syllabus, and then they allowed us to go. I used to tutor this girl in French, and I would always leave school and go there. And this time, I had a long time before I was about to tutor her. It just so happened the night before, I went to Toronto to visit a boyfriend that I had long distance, and I got a speeding ticket, and I lost my license. And I had like a $500 ticket, and I was totally freaking out. And I decided, you know what, I'll kill time right now, go to the bank, pay off my debt, no one will ever know, and I'll have a clean slate. So I went to the bank, and back then, used to be the cell phones, they would tell you like, you have 35 missed calls. Now you just see a missed call. You don't know how many times someone's been like stalking you down. So I remember it was the first week of school, I was a little bit anxious, I was trying to be a goody two-shoes, I put my phone on silent or even turned it off. So I'm waiting in the bank, there's a line, and I turn my cell phone off and I see 35 missed calls from my father. So I was a little taken aback because as close as I am with my father, he's not the most talkative person, he definitely doesn't call me 35 times. So the first thing I thought was something's wrong or he found out that I lost my license. So I called him back, there was no answer. I called my mother and I said, "Mom, is everything okay?" She starts, my mother's a tough woman. She broke down in tears and she said, "Amanda, I wish everything was okay." She said, "Go outside, Daddy's gonna be there." So I waited outside and within seconds, my father like screeched around the street, grabbed me like a baby and told me my best friend in the whole entire world just passed away in a car accident. So here I was, 17 years old, about to turn 18, and my world came tumbling down. It really was the most difficult time in my life. And I seeked help everywhere. I went to social workers, psychologists, you name it, guidance counselors, friends, family, and no one had anything to say that felt good at all. And it was a very, very difficult period for me. And my first instinct was to go to shul, for whatever reason. Like I said, I grew up traditional, but my mother was like a fight every single high holiday to go to shul. I really never enjoyed it. I had no relationship with the rabbi. I kind of always felt like, I don't know if anyone of you guys have met her husband with the beard, and my husband looks exactly the same, but I kind of was always very intimidated by that, and I just never had any relationship with any rabbi, so it was like interesting for me that I wanted to go to shul. I went to a conservative shul at that point, and I literally would just go there, sit there. I didn't even open up a siddur. I didn't even know what that was. I didn't know how to pray, and I kind of was just there staring into the clouds, and something did feel good just being there. So this went on for a while. And a couple of years later, it was about 2 years later, there was the March of Living where you go to Poland and then you go to Israel and you visit all the concentration camps. And this was a very heavy trip, but I decided that I wanted to go on this and maybe this would be a good thing for me. It was the first year that they were offering it to young adults. My year, they didn't have it. So I decided to go on this trip, and on this trip, I really felt as though I put my life into perspective, and I also met two wonderful rabbis from Montreal. And like I mentioned, I never really had any relationship with rabbis, was kind of intimidated by them. But here I was on this trip in Poland with these two very cool rabbis. One was an Orthodox rabbi, and one was a Chabad rabbi. And the Chabad rabbi's role was to be the spiritual leader. So his job was to go around to everyone, get to know them, see how this trip is since it was such a heavy trip. And he came to me and I was kind of like a little taken aback, like here I was, I think I was like wearing a tank top and mini shorts. I was like, boy, is this respectful? I kind of felt anxious. But within seconds, I felt myself so comfortable opening up my heart to him and telling him what I've been going through for the past 2 years. I was mourning for the past 2 years, and really mourning. And I remember him sharing a story with me, a personal story, how he lost his daughter at birth. And he shared with me the strength he had and how he overcame this. And I remember at that moment, I really had like an Oprah aha moment where I took a step back and I was like, wow, if I thought of life like this rabbi, life would be so much easier. Because till this point, I was very sensitive, and everything I heard, I was like scared to read the newspaper, turn on the news, because it was all such negativity, and my like soul honestly couldn't have handled it. So I became very, very close with this rabbi, and my return to Montreal, he invited me for Shabbat. And I remember going to his house for Shabbat for the first time and just being like amazed by his family, as I'm sure most of you have been, if you had the honor to go to Yocheved for Shabbos. And they were so warm, and they really welcomed me with open arms, no judgment, and I felt so comfortable. And they honestly, at the end of the day, it wasn't Rabbi and Rebbitzin, they were my friends that I became very, very close with. I also felt as though I had the best of both worlds, because I used to go there and I had this amazing spiritual, enlightening Shabbos, and then I would leave at a reasonable hour. I was a young girl. I'd go out to the clubs in Montreal, great nightlife, and I really got the best of both worlds. And what was great was I don't want to call it ignorant or naive. I really didn't know that there was a concept of becoming religious, that there was this movement. I thought, people are born like this and people are born like that. So in a way, it really was a blessing in disguise, because I never felt that guilt that some people have, or Jewish neshama, like, oh, I'm eating pork, or I'm doing this. And I remember like going there and really totally just being myself. And even now I'm like, oy vavoy, like things I used to say to them, they're probably like, and they never judged me. I really was totally myself, very open. And anyways, a couple years later, on March 21st, 2007, I was 21 years old. I was waitressing at a restaurant. And the day before, I like that ring, haven't watched TV in a long time, too religious, but it sounds like. And I was working at a restaurant, and the day before I was exercising, and I didn't exercise quite often, and I don't know if you know that feeling, like the next day after you have to you can't even sit on the toilet. So I had that feeling all day, but it wasn't getting better, it was just getting worse. And my boss said, it's not a busy night, you could go home. So I was on my way home, and a friend of mine called me and gave me some Jewish guilt that there's this fundraising event for Israel, I have to go, you have to come with me, da-da-da-da-da. I got sucked into it and I ended up going. And I promised her, I said, she promised me that we would go for a very short period of time, we'd have a quick drink, and we would leave. We went, we're having a drink, and she kept on saying to me, are you okay? And I was like, yeah, I'm okay. I told you I'm not feeling 100%. She's like, Amanda, you're holding yourself. I was like, I am? I'm like, I didn't even realize. I was like, I don't know, maybe I'm anxious, exams are coming up. She's like, no, you're like holding yourself for dear life. I said, I don't know. And she's like, let's go. I don't feel good about this. She drove me home. At the time I was living on my own downtown. And as I'm about to get out of the car and saying my goodbyes, I said, rush me to the hospital, I'm having a heart attack. At the age of 21, I thought I was having a heart attack. I get to the hospital, they thought I was some crazy Jewish girl. They took all the tests as they had to by law, and they said, you didn't have a heart attack, go sit in the waiting room and we'll tell you your results. I waited in the waiting room in agony, like 15 hours, and eventually they came out and told me that an enzyme in my heart that was at an abnormal level was actually the same enzyme that's released when you do have a heart attack, and they told me that I had to stay in the hospital till it was diluted on my system, and I'd have to be on IV. So I was on IV for 10 days. I saw a different doctor every single day, different opinion every single day. And it was a very difficult period of my life. I wasted away. I was very thin. I was also diagnosed with a muscle disease at that time. After a while, they sent me home with no answers, and I just knew there was nothing I could do. So I went back to my normal life, but tried as much as I can to be healthy and eat well. I quit smoking. I did go to the Johns Hopkins, all these amazing hospitals, and trying to figure out, knowing there was something wrong. On July 19th, I woke up after a night of tossing and turning and was at a loss of breath. Memories from a few months ago creeped in on me, and I knew that what the doctor said would be a one-time occurrence was occurring again. I contacted my mother, who took me very seriously and told me to go to the St. Justin's Hospital right away, where her friend would see me and do all the necessary testing. Dr. Mogerby greeted me with open arms and sent me to the nursing station. I waited in the waiting room till the results were in. I was told that my inflammation was high from the blood test, and he showed me the results from the scan. I looked at the computer, and he pointed out this bump in my chest. He calmed me down and told me that it could be possibly nothing, but he wanted me to repeat the testing. I followed through with his instruction, and when I was once again called into his office, I was greeted by my entire family. I knew at this point that I would receive my answers. I was shocked to discover that I had a tumor in my chest that was 11.4 centimeters and cancerous. I was diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma. Ironically, this diagnosis gave me great comfort that I had direction and would be able to properly treat it. My mother was in a state of panic and was furious as to how the other hospital was not able to detect this. The doctors knew that there had to be an error for it not to be detected after being there for such a long period of time and going through the right protocol. He contacted the hospital to send over the radiologist report. It came within seconds to read. High prominence in chest, highly recommendation to do CT scan with infusion immediately. They never did it. It was clear that I was misdiagnosed. Here I was, 21 years of age, forced to put my life on hold for the present. All the things I enjoyed, my education, my job, my social life, were no longer possible. I immediately underwent a biopsy, a bone marrow test, steroid therapy, 6 months of chemotherapy treatments to fight this dreadful disease. And following that, the doctors had prescribed radiation therapy and Nucilata shots. When I heard the diagnosis, I decided right then and there that I was not going to allow this disease to tear me apart, but rather I was going to fight back and be a survivor. I only realized years later, when I was first diagnosed, even though I didn't know at the time, it happened during the period of the 3 weeks of national mourning, Tisha B'Av, that she just mentioned, when the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed. It made and makes so much sense that the darkest period in Jewish history was the darkest